So we have come to the end of an era in Disney animation. Again. Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for Tarzan, which came out in 1999 as the 10th and final film of the Disney Renaissance. And I guess the thing to distinguish the end of this era and the beginning of the post-Renaissance, which we'll talk about soon, is that this movie came out the year before the beginning of the new millennium. That's the best answer I could probably give. The movie opens up with a family who had just escaped from a shipwreck, and this ship is on fire at the beginning of the movie. So it wastes no time setting up what needs to be set up. So they end up washing adrift into Africa, and the husband and wife decide to build a tree house to try to raise the family. Unfortunately, the two parents are killed by a vicious and very aggressive leopard. Meanwhile, in the jungles of Africa, there is a gorilla family, and their only child is killed by that very same leopard. Eventually, the mother gorilla, Kala, voiced by Glenn Close, finds the little baby, adopts him, saves him from the leopard, and raises it as her own and names him Tarzan, which unfortunately doesn't sit well with her mate and the leader of the group, Czerniak, voiced by Lance Henriksen. So eventually Tarzan grows up, but soon discovers more of his kind, actual humans in Africa, and this puts him at a crossroads to where, does he leave with his own kind, or does he stay with the family that has pretty much raised him his entire life? Now, when it comes to movies, 1999 is often regarded as one of the best years for movies. I mean, sure, you have some stinkers like Wild Wild West and some disappointments like The Phantom Menace, but I mean, Fight Club, The Matrix, The Iron Giant, American Pie, Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris, Toy Story 2, and Tarzan. Like, you really can't go wrong with that list of movies. And yes, I do think Tarzan is a great animated movie. I only saw this movie once, in theaters when it came out, opening weekend, and I remember liking it as a kid, but having rewatched all these Disney animated movies in order, and seeing the downfall of the Disney Renaissance with films like Pocahontas, Hunchback, and Hercules, even with Mulan being as great as it is, I was wondering if I would just look at Tarzan and go, yeah, this doesn't really hold up anymore. But no, it does, and it's a fantastic way to end this era of Disney animation. The animation is still very top-notch, and much like with Mulan, there's a lot of action in this movie, and whenever Tarzan is swinging or even surfing on the vines, the animation is just so cool to look at, and a very creative and smart way to blend CG animation with traditional 2D animation. It's absolutely gorgeous to watch, especially when the movie does a lot of panning shots. That's impressive to look at in its own, which, if I had one tiny criticism about the movie that I'm just going to get off my chest right now, I think there are a few too many environments that are CG. Now, when it comes to Tarzan on the vines, or when the action itself is very fast-paced and energetic, I don't have a problem with that. No, my problems come in with scenes that are very subtle and quiet, where the environments are CG, and there's really no reason for them to be CG, like when Kala enters the treehouse and finds baby Tarzan. I didn't think the treehouse needed to be CGI, but whatever. The animation is still gorgeous regardless. Now, as for the songs of the movie, Phil Collins is responsible for them, but this is not a musical. All of the songs that you hear in this movie are performed by Phil Collins himself. It's a great soundtrack as well. It's very similar to how Randy Newman performed all the songs in Toy Story. Not one character actually sings. The closest this movie ever gets to being a musical is when Rosie O'Donnell's character, Turk, and her friends find Jane's camp, and they just decide to make a whole mess out of it and pretty much jam to all the equipment, the silverware. It pretty much becomes them performing in a band at the end of the day, but that's about it. And I remember when Doug Walker reviewed this movie for his Disneycember series 10 years ago, he had a problem with the Phil Collins songs to the point where he just kind of mocked them, and he just had an issue with this film not being a musical, and why'd you hire Phil Collins? I'm the exact opposite. I think the songs are pretty incredible, as I said before, and because Phil Collins is performing them, I am so thankful that this movie is not a musical, because with the last couple of movies post Lion King, it really got to the point where they were in themselves parodies of Disney movies, but they just didn't know it. And sure, Mulan did have some musical numbers as well, but it wasn't a big focus like with Pocahontas, Hunchback, or Hercules. And the songs were not done by Alan Menken, so they have a different flavor to them. And again, I could not be more grateful that this movie is not a musical. Now, as for the characters, Tarzan himself is voiced by Tony Goldwyn, who was one of the camp counselors / victims in the best Friday the 13th movie ever made, Jason Lives. But anyway, he does a pretty decent job as Tarzan. He's very charismatic, he's funny, and the supervising animator for this character is, once again, Glenn Keane. And having watched all these movies weekly, it's easier to really point out when Glenn Keane has animated a character, and Tarzan's just a lot of fun. Although, if I had another issue with this movie, and this is the only other issue I have, in a world with talking animals, how is Tarzan able to speak perfect English when among the apes, but when he meets Jane for the first time, he's having a little trouble? That just doesn't seem right. Even in The Little Mermaid, the mer people could still speak with humans without any problems whatsoever, despite all the animals talking. I don't know. It's a weird nitpick, and maybe it's not a nitpick, but it's... Moving on. Tarzan is cool, but of course you couldn't have a Tarzan story without his love interest, Jane. And here she's voiced by Minnie Driver, and she's your typical damsel in distress, except Jane in this version of Tarzan has a ton of personality. She is very funny all around. She's just a more interesting damsel in distress than Meg was in Hercules. Again, I still like Meg, but Jane's got my vote this time around. And the dynamic between both Tarzan and Jane is really good. They have great chemistry with one another, and there are just some fun scenes involving these two characters. And if nothing else, it feels like a believable romance. Now, I mentioned before that you had Rosie O'Donnell as Turk, Tarzan's ape friend, but you also have Wayne Knight as Tantor, who would also voice the Chicken Man in Toy Story 2 the same year. And they're pretty much trying to recreate what The Lion King did with Timon and Pumbaa. And they're not annoying, but I didn't think they had much of a place in this movie. They just kind of feel like they're there because they needed some sort of comic relief with the movie. And again, they're fine characters, but I just didn't think they had too much of a reason to be in this movie outside of, again, comic relief, which in a sense might be a good thing, because one of the big plot lines of this movie is Tarzan trying to get the approval of his adoptive father, Czerniak. And when I first saw this movie as a kid, I didn't really like Czerniak. I just thought he was too grumpy. I just didn't understand why he was the character that he was, and I didn't feel sympathy for him at the end. But again, that was me as a kid. Rewatching this movie as an adult, there's a lot about Czerniak that is very compelling beyond just surface level, and I think Lance Henriksen does a really good job with the voice role and gives this character a lot more depth than a character like this probably should have, because he lost his son to a leopard. And when Kala brings in Tarzan, he's disapproving because Tarzan could never replace his son, and he just has a chip on his shoulder throughout the whole movie, but it's very understandable why. And I didn't even know this was Lance Henriksen doing the voice until me being an adult, because by this point I've already been familiar with him in Aliens, and Lance Henriksen does a fantastic job. Now, this would be the part of the review where I go over my problems with the movie, but I already did throughout this entire review, and those two problems I had were, how is Tarzan able to speak perfect English with the animals but not with the humans, and has to learn English from them, and the fact that there are too many CGI backgrounds when there didn't really need to be any. So that's all I have to say in terms of criticisms. Tarzan, at the end of the day, really is a great movie, and just a perfect way to end the Renaissance. Not only by giving this era one final hurrah, but also setting the groundwork for Disney in the future. Like, every Disney movie didn't have to be a musical where characters are singing and dancing. Even if you just relied on a famous artist performing the songs, that still counts as not being a musical. So it's a perfect way to end my generation of Disney movies, and again, a perfect way to kick off the new era. And for that, I'd say worth seeing in your lifetime. The only reason I'm not saying get off your ass and go see it right now is because it didn't really move me the same way movies like Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast did. But still, it's a fantastic film regardless, and really does show you that 1999 was one of the best years for movies. And there you go, that's my review for Tarzan. And now, we are done with the Renaissance. It's time to move forward with the post-Renaissance, with the first film in that era, Fantasia 2000. Now, my plan with this series of reviews is to review one Disney film a week from Snow White to Wreck-It Ralph, because I've done the math. That's 52 movies in total, and there are 52 Wednesdays in the year of 2021. But unfortunately, I missed a week back when I was reviewing the movies of the Silver Age because of issues in my personal life that I'm not going to get into. But I'm going to make up for that. We're going to talk about Fantasia 2000 not next week, but tomorrow. We are jumping right into the post-Renaissance earlier than usual, and then next week we'll talk about the movie that directly follows Fantasia 2000. But first, I want to know what you guys think about Tarzan. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one. Hello everyone, I just wanted to say thank you all for watching my review for Tarzan. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.